At this point in my life, I'm not a huge NFL fan anymore. I kind of watch it more through fantasy football. Like I had a good fantasy football year, so I was more into it, but I'm like all the way into the college football playoff. So for you right now, are you more into the NFL or college, or is this a different year because so folks know you are a Penn State grad,
I am.
correct? So you have a huge
Yes.
game tonight. And by the way,
Yes.
let's let people know. So this game is 6:30 Central Time, I believe. I just looked at the line. Okay, 6:30 Central Time. So we have obviously Penn State, Notre Dame. On ESPN, Notre Dame is a 1-point favorite. The total is 44.5. And I saw an X before we started. Apparently the flu bug is going through Notre Dame's locker room, but it looks like it's not with a lot of starters. It says like a lot of backups and a lot of special teamers, right?
I mean, I don't want anyone to get sick, like long term, but maybe just for a 24-hour bug.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Here you go. Let me find it for you. Here's the tweet I saw. Okay. This is from Tyler Horka. He covers Notre Dame for On3 Sports. He says, an hour ago, been told the flu is going around the Notre Dame locker room. Those who have it bad, but it sounds like that's mostly backups and special teams players. Still something to monitor for the Fighting Irish going into the Orange Bowl versus Penn State tonight. What do you think? James Franklin, your boys, they going to get it done or what?
Well, Franklin's history would tell you probably not. I mean, he, as you know, is an Ohio State fan. Penn State and under Franklin has been great against everybody except Ohio State and Michigan, which happen to be the two biggest games that Penn State has, although they don't play Michigan every year. They did not play them this year. But I think it's hard for Franklin won 2 playoff games. Let's give him some credit. But they were against teams that Penn State should have beat. The college, right. Everyone knows that the playoff seeding this year was janky. It will change next year. I assume they will not give automatic bids to the first top 4 seeds to conference champions. That distorted the whole thing. It made Penn State what did they end up being, the 5 seed? No, sorry, the 6 seed, where they should have been the 4. So they got to play 2 games against teams where they were big favorites. I think they were double-digit favorites in both of their first-round games. So based on his track record, probably not. But this would be that kind of look. This would be that program-defining win for Franklin. It's kind of like Ryan Day at Ohio State with you. Like Franklin's if you look at his record, you can't fire the guy. I mean, he's been very successful, but he has hit a ceiling that is clear and obvious. And this would be a breakthrough for that. If you win a 3rd playoff game, beating a team now that you are a slight underdog against, I think Notre Dame's a 2-point favorite, 1.5, 2 points. And get to the freaking college football playoff championship, probably to lose to Ohio State again. I think that is a hell of a nice season. And that would be something that I think Penn State fans could get behind and say, okay, we still can't beat Ohio State, assuming Ohio State beats Texas and then beats Penn State. But at least we broke through and beat a pretty damn good Notre Dame team and had a nice run, won 3 playoff games, got to the college football championship. So I would take that. You asked me about my NFL versus college. My first love way before I went to college was the Steelers. My dad was a huge Steeler fan, and this was during the Cowher era when he got there, and they were good, and they got to the Super Bowl in the mid-90s against the Cowboys. So that cemented my love for the Steelers. And I think you and I talked about this before. As I've gotten older, to be honest with you, I still love sports. But I used to have a favorite team and sometimes 2 that I followed in like every major sport. And I would watch all their games. Like I, for some reason, as a very, very middle-class kid growing up in central Pennsylvania, fell in love with Duke basketball. It was after they beat UNLV. You remember that? UNLV was undefeated. I think it was 90 or 91.
Yeah, that was Larry Johnson and Stacey Augmon.
Yes, Greg Anthony. They were
Greg
loaded.
Anthony, yep.
I think all 5 of their starters ended up playing in the NBA. I mean, they were unbelievable. They were a huge favorite. It was like 20 points in the Final 4, and Duke beat them. And then the next year is when Leitner hit the shot against Kentucky. And I was watching that live, and that cemented me. So I'm watching all these Duke games as a middle-class kid who didn't really, take high school as seriously as I should have. Like, there was no chance I was going to Duke. I didn't realize that I probably would have hated the kids who went to Duke, these elitist, nerd snobs, right? But my point is, that has all fallen on the wayside. The only thing I really care about now are the Steelers and Penn State when they're good. So I'm more of an NFL guy, but I will say, I don't know if this is true for you. I have watched more college football this year than I have in probably at least a decade because of the playoff. I think having that expanded playoff, having stakes for more games has really, like, even though the seeding is screwed up and a lot of the games have been blowouts, in fact, all but one have been blowouts, I think this college football playoff at 12 teams has been a tremendous success for the sport. And once they make some tweaks to it, I think it's going to be great for college football.
Yeah, I've always been much more college football fan than NFL. Growing up in Toledo, so you had the Lions, who they were okay. They were like always 9-7, but they had Barry Sanders growing up, but they never did much in the playoffs. Then you had the Browns. My uncle was a big Browns fan. Then the Browns went away. I've always loved Ohio State football. It's really the only team I care about at all at this point in my life. And I've always said this, and I know other people will say, oh, we don't feel sorry for Ohio State fans. But in a weird way, Ohio State has been so good my entire lifetime that there's not a lot of exciting games, right? Like if you just look at the schedule, seriously, and I know people say, oh, you can't complain about that, but like I'm kind of busy now and I got stuff to do and I have kids. So I'm probably not going to watch them play Purdue. And maybe they lose to Purdue every once in a while. They lost to Purdue several years ago. But like when I look at the schedule, I'm like, okay, you know when Michigan game is. Like Penn State, okay, there's usually one good non-conference game, usually. That wasn't really the case this year. Kind of out of nowhere, Indiana was good this year. So that was a game. And they had Oregon this year. What am I talking about? Okay, Oregon. See, this is where my brain is.
That was a great game.
Oregon's a conference game. I was thinking, like, wait, they played Oregon. You forget that Oregon is now in the freaking Big Ten. So anyway, just right there, what is that? 4 or 5 games that on paper you're looking at like, I'm into that game. They actually played Nebraska close, a game I didn't even watch. But I agree with you. I think the best thing about the college football playoff expanding, even though the games for the most part have sucked, and I think that will improve when you get rid of the auto buys and you have normal seating.
Yes,
but to me, the last 10 years, there's only been 3 interesting games in the playoffs every year, and it's the college football playoff games. It's the 2 semifinals, and it's the championship game. I used to like bowl games. I used to care about bowl games, but ever since the players started opting out, and then you had the transfer portal, I'm sorry. Like I got in this big argument. It was half fun with Mizzou fans last year because they played Ohio State, but I'm sorry. If you're a big-time program from the Big Ten or the SEC, if you don't make the college football playoff, your season is essentially over at that point. And a lot of it's luck at that point. Like if you have a young team, a bunch of freshmen and sophomores, well, they might play. But you may play another team, they have a bunch of NFL guys or half their teams in the portal. So again, like if you're playing one of these bowl games, you want to win. Don't get me wrong. But like anybody trying to tell me that's a real indication of that year's team, if you have 5 dudes sitting out for the NFL, you have 8 dudes in the portal, right? You got a couple people who are kind of banged up, so they're not going to play, but they would if the game mattered. Like, I'm sorry. So that's where the college football playoff is great because they added 12 games now. You have a whole month. You have a whole month's worth of games to look forward to. 4 rounds of playoffs to look forward to these games. That to me is what's great. And the games are going to improve. This has been a weird year, I think.
Yeah, they'll make the obvious correction, which is eliminate the automatic top 4 seeds being conference champions. Although I hope they keep the conference champions getting in because Arizona State's a good example. Yes. I don't think they would have made it, right? If it were just 12 teams with no automatic bid. And look what they did against Texas. I mean, that was the game so far. I do think it is important to some degree that these 2 games and the championship be competitive. I mean, I think that would be nice after we've seen essentially 7 of the 8 games were more than 1 score that have been decided so far. But in terms of getting, think about these iconic programs, Penn State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Texas. The tradition, the history, having them play in games with this kind of stakes, the playoffs been a huge success, even with the blowouts. And part of it, too, is the regular season. There were so many more games late in the year because on Saturdays I flip around, I'm watching my son, I'm doing other things. But normally I would have never paid these games any attention. But because one or both of the teams had a chance at the playoff, I watched 5-10 minutes of the game that I would have never even thought about in years past. That is what the playoff can do. College football's got to tweak the playoff a little bit. They have to, I think college football needs to standardize. Obviously, the big one is NIL. They have to figure that out. There has to be some type of structure around that because the playing field is so unequal and so chaotic right now. And also maybe tweak the transfer portal. I think it's twice a year now. Maybe move that to once. James Franklin talked about standardizing the schedules with the number of conference games. I think maybe eliminating conference championships, because one of the things about the conference championship is losing it actually was better than winning it. I mean, look at the path Penn State had versus the path Oregon had, and Oregon beat Penn State in the Big Ten championship. Now, that probably, again, will change next year to some degree if they eliminate the conference championship game. But it distorts teams getting into the playoffs, too, because now you're debating whether a team that lost a conference championship game should get in over a team that didn't even appear in a conference championship game. Like Alabama was the big example this year. Alabama didn't make it to the SEC championship game. And people were talking about whether they should get in over SMU, who made it and lost. And, it's like, do you punish SMU because they lost a conference championship game? And the committee ultimately, I think, made the right call going with SMU.
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't punish SMU. I think one good thing, and I got in a nice little argument on X with somebody about this the other day. I think they needed to expand the playoff, and this year's playoff, in my opinion, proves that. I don't think you needed 12. And here's the difference. If you want to argue about Ole Miss, Alabama, South Carolina, like who should be the 13th team, those are all fun debates. In my opinion, I don't think any of those teams this year could actually have won the national championship. And that's the difference. Like, if you want to bitch about the 13th team, that's fine. And it's fun for content. But I think in years past, because the goal of sports is to have the best or most deserving champion. And I think with only 4 teams, there were probably some years where a 5th seed, a 6th seed could have actually won the national championship in this format that we have right now. Case in point is Ohio State and Notre Dame. If you went by straight seeding, Eric, so obviously Boise and Arizona State had higher seeds. But if you went by the rankings I'm talking about, I believe Ohio State would be 6 and Notre Dame would be 5. So that right there shows you that they would not be in the playoffs in previous years. And they've had the most impressive wins of the playoff by far. Ohio State smoking Oregon. I think you can make the case that Notre Dame beating Big Bad Georgia was another huge win right there. So those teams wouldn't even have been in the playoff in previous years. And that's why I think they had to expand to either 6 or 8. I'm not going to complain about 12, but that's why I don't think the arguments for the teams left out, to me, it's fun, but like they don't really have a case. None of those teams, in my opinion, could have won 3 games or 4 games. Ohio State will have to win 4 games, right? They already beat Tennessee, Oregon. They'd have to beat Texas and then Notre Dame or Penn State. That's a tough trek. I don't think any of those 9-3 SEC teams could have won 4 games to win the national championship. And that's the difference to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be the 3, 4. If you did just straight seeding, the final 4 would be the 3, 4, 5, and 6 seeds. So that would tell you that you need more than 4 if you want to get the true champion. And also, I think Arizona State made a strong statement to tell you that you can't necessarily just assume that the secondary conferences, let's call them, the ACC and the Big 12, are going to be inferior every year. Some years, obviously, their champion will be far inferior, but not this year. And the SEC, obviously, top to bottom, is a way stronger conference than the Big 12. But I like a system where the Big 12 gets 1 team at least, and the SEC, I'm sorry, the 4th or 5th team from the SEC gets left out. I don't feel too bad from that. And I think Arizona State validated that with the way that they played despite losing. So I think 12 is the perfect number for now. Let's see how it plays out over the next few years. Let's see what happens next year when the seeding, I assume they'll make the change for next year with the real seeding and not distort it with the conference champions getting the top 4. The biggest thing, as you said, it improves the playoff system. It gives you a true champion. Also, like I said earlier, it makes the regular season mean more. It adds so much in terms of stakes to so many games. So I think it's been a huge success despite 7 of the 8 games essentially being blowouts or close to blowouts so far. I did think about this when you were talking about Ohio State. Because you were such a fan when you were young, did you ever think about going to Ohio State?
Yeah, so many people though, like my brother went to Ohio State at the start. My sister who's younger, she went to Ohio State. I had so many aunts, uncles, so many friends. Like we would party at Ohio State growing up. So in a way, I kind of wanted to do something different. I do
Yeah.
wish I went to Bradley. I wish I would have went somewhere that had a football team because I do think it's fun. Not just, to me, it's not just when you're there. Like having your football Saturday when you go there is awesome, but it's also just the rest of your life. Like it's pretty cool to
Yep.
have a team like that the rest of your life, to go to bowl games. Same with basketball. Now, Bradley has an okay basketball team. So, like, Bradley will make the NCAA tournament every once in a while. I think they made it 3 times since I've been graduated college. But it'd be pretty sweet. Like for you, Penn State, you get an awesome football season every year. I know Penn State's not great at basketball, but I look at it like Michigan State, for example. I worked in Lansing for 2 years and I was about 24, 23 years old. In a way, I feel like I went to Michigan State because I partied at the bar so much. And I kind of got, for that 2 years, I was into like the Tom Izzo basketball team, the Mark D'Antonio football team. And so to have that the rest of your life, to buy your gear, to go to the games, is pretty cool. But like growing up, I kind of wanted to do something different because so many people around me went to Ohio State. Hey, we're at an hour. Thank you everybody for watching. Support our St. Louis sponsors here, Triad Bank, St. Louis Lawn Care, St. Louis Equipment, Corner Butcher, and Chop House. Let's give our predictions for the college football playoff. I'll start here. And by the way, I'm gonna pick Notre Dame, but I've actually gained a lot of respect for Penn State this year. And by the way, more so in their losses than their wins. Like I don't look at them beating SMU and Boise as much as playing really close to Ohio State. And even that Oregon game was a shootout. So like the defense wasn't running on all cylinders, but like to score 37 on Oregon, to lose by, 1 possession. I know it wasn't exactly like that the whole game, but I think this Penn State team is legit, but I think you're running into the most legit Notre Dame team in my lifetime of remembering football. Like I was alive for Lou Holtz, but I don't remember it. Like in the last 30 years, I think this is probably the best Notre Dame team. I'm going to say Notre Dame wins close, and I'll be a homer. I think Ohio State wins by about 10. What do you think?
I'm going to go with Ohio State as well. I mean, I think they're the most talented team in the country, and that Michigan game, that was a fluke. I think they've proven that in the playoff. They're just on a roll right now. And Texas's defense proved it's pretty vulnerable against Arizona State. Yeah. It's not this all-time great defense like people were saying it was. So I'm going to go with Ohio State fairly easily. Penn State, I think, ekes it out over Notre Dame. I'll be a homer here. And then once again, we lose to Ohio State yet again, this time on the biggest national stage in the biggest moment, just like we always do. So I think Ohio State will win it.
I will say whether Notre Dame or Penn State wins that game will not surprise me one bit. And I guess that's not just going by the line. The line is 1 point. I haven't even looked at the Ohio State line. I know it opened at like 4.5 and then it went to 6.5. I don't know what it's at now. I'll check. But I would be, I shouldn't say I'd be that surprised because Ohio State laid such an egg versus Michigan and their offensive game plan was it just made no sense. I think people now understand why Ohio State fans were mad at Ryan Day because it didn't make any sense of the game plan offensively versus Michigan. So could they lay another egg? Sure. I'm trying to find the spread on that game. Let's see here. Here it is. Where are we at, baby? Here we go. Okay. So this is tomorrow. Another 6:30 game tomorrow. I'm buying time, Eric. Where's the goddamn spread?
Oh, for which game?
What do we got here? Ohio State, Texas. Okay, here it is.
7, right? Is it 6?
I see 6 on ESPN. So either way, ESPN opened at 5. It's 6. The over-runner's 54.5. And now it's 53.5. So hopefully a fun shootout. The Notre Dame Penn State game is supposed to be a little lower scoring. All right. So I
think it'll be good.
Ohio State.
I'm excited for
Penn State.
I have Ohio State and Penn State with Ohio State winning, and I'm excited for the NFL playoffs. We can talk more about that next week. The first round, most of these games, or not most, but at least half of them, there's a really clear favorite. And of course, the big boys, Kansas City and Detroit, don't even play. They get the first round bye. But I love the NFL playoffs, that first weekend with 6 games. And now that the college football playoffs expanded, think about this. You have, starting tonight, you have college football semifinal tonight, college football semifinal tomorrow, NFL playoff games Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. I mean, that is quite a nice 5-day run.
Love it. Yeah, we'll talk NFL next week. To be honest, I don't really know anything about any of these teams, so I'll watch a couple of the games this weekend. Although I was looking at them, a lot of them look. I know people were joking about this, like that the Houston Texans always get that first shit game. It does seem like that. It seems like there's a lot of shit games. And it's crazy that the Lions, again, growing up around Lions country and covering the Lions when they were horrible, it is amazing that the Lions are now the bullies. Like, it's great. It's almost something that doesn't even make sense. Like, you're kind of surprised it's possible. The Lions were so bad for so long that it's weird that they're this good.
It's great. I think it's a great story. And for anyone, I'm obviously not a Lions fan, but anyone who grew up and is roughly our age remembers the Lions, even people like you, people who were further away, because of Barry Sanders, because they were always at least competitive with him, even though they were rarely good. And also on Thanksgiving, I really think that matters, because people would see them every year, and you would see Sanders, and they'd be playing in that game that, pretty much everybody in America was watching every year.